Even professional fighters who get paid to have physical altercations have on occasion resorted to settling their beefs outside of the 8-sided cage. Sometimes a rivalry has gotten too intense, or maybe the trash talk has gone too far. Either way, the promise of the fight itself was not enough to stop these fighters from trying to settle their beef outside the octagon. When both these guys arrived in the UFC, they made big impressions, both for different reasons though. The rise of Paddy Pimblett had its fair share of controversies along the way. I mean, he'd been banned on Instagram several times before even getting to the UFC. But in 2021, Paddy Pimblett decided to tweet his take on Topuria's country of Georgia. Pimblett essentially was mocking the country's history, referencing the Russo-Georgian War, a conflict that had profound impacts on Georgia and its citizens.
He was very disrespectful to me, to my country, to all my people, and he just behaved like a fucking idiot, you know. He started to talk about the war we had against Russia, and that he said something. Now I understand why the Russians put the bombs in Georgia, and many kids died in that war.
Either way, conflict was clearly brewing between these two, and Paddy said he'd gladly be the guy to welcome Ilia to lightweight, claiming that he'd run through him. It just so happened though that both men would be booked to fight on a UFC London card in March 2022. I guess the fighter hotel wasn't that big either, because they ran into each other in the lobby, and in coming face-to-face, a scuffle ensued.
That shirt. Fuck you, bitch. Fuck you, bitch.
So before the UFC could potentially line these guys up together, only if Topuria came up a weight class, mind you, they had already gone head to head, and although it wasn't much of a fight, it seemed like they weren't going to need a UFC contract to settle this one.
When I saw him last time, he got an hand sanitizer bottle bounced off his foot. Do something, stand up. What'll you do? You'll do nothing. You'll do nothing, you little fart. Go and sit back down. Sit back down.
Of course, they continued to go back and forth on social media. Topuria called him a dick eater, and no, of course, Pimblett never apologized and instead doubled down on his stance, calling Topuria too sensitive and continuing to mock him online. He later dismissed the feud as just banter, but Topuria vowed to break his face if they ever fought in the octagon, or I'm sure if they see each other again, because this is one rivalry that has already had one beef outside of the octagon, and unless they do eventually sign to fight each other, it might continue.
Can't wait for him to come back up to lightweight. Still think I'd beat him. I really do. By kicking him on the feet or taking him down or submitting him, I genuinely think I'd beat him.
For the most part though, Ilia handles himself like a professional and then gets in the cage to handle business. For some fighters like Nick Diaz though, the fight doesn't end when the final bell sounds. For both Nick Diaz and Joe Riggs in 2006, they were right at this point in their careers where their scheduled UFC fight just became hostile before it started because of who they are. Aggressive, never back down guys and both rising top welterweight prospects. The tension was palpable during the pre-fight press conference and weigh-ins, with both fighters fired up so much that it required officials to keep them apart.
Me, Rich Franklin, Tim Sylvia, we were walking back from checking my weight the day before weigh-ins. And he says something to the effect of like, "You're gonna make weight this time, motherfucker." And then we almost get into a fight, and when we officially weigh in.
The fight itself was a closely contested battle, with Riggs ultimately securing a unanimous decision victory. But both athletes sustained significant injuries during the match, and they needed to be transferred to the hospital for medical attention. According to Riggs, while he was walking down a hallway with his IV pole, Diaz began taunting him from across the hall. The verbal exchange quickly escalated when Diaz approached Riggs and threw a punch, leading to a physical brawl in the hospital corridor.
As I turn around, he's like, "What?" Fucking hits me. And he like, for some reason, hop into like a closet or something. And thank God he did what he did. He put his head like right on the side, because I couldn't hit it. My hands were, my fingers were probably this long because my hands were so swollen. And so I was elbowing the fuck out of his head.
Despite the chaos, quite unsurprisingly, no legal action was taken against either fighter. But yeah, this incident kind of shows that for some fighters, this goes way beyond a sport. Some guys hate each other so much, it goes beyond just competition, and there might not be a better example than the rivalry between Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier. As it stands as one of the most intense and personal feuds in mixed martial arts history, their animosity transcended the octagon, spilling into public altercations and heated exchanges that we all couldn't help but watch. And it all basically started from something very, very small. In 2010, the two men met for the first time backstage when Cain Velasquez, DC's teammate, was fighting Brock Lesnar, and during a casual encounter, Jones said to Cormier, "I bet I could take you down." For Cormier, an Olympic wrestler, this comment was more than just banter. It was a challenge. Even with a simple statement, he later said it offended him. He felt like John just had a big ego. Who was this kid to say he could take me down? And it started to build from there. By the time Daniel made his UFC debut, John was already ready to get personal, tweeting about him looking out of shape as a heavyweight. But it didn't stop DC from going on an absolute tear, and flash forward a few months, DC announced he was coming down to the light heavyweight division, setting the stage for a potential clash. DC then did nothing but win at 205, and after a fantastic performance against Dan Henderson, called out John.
John Jones, you can't run away from me forever. I'm the kid at the wrestling tournament that is always in your bracket. No matter where you go, boy, I'm coming. You better hurry because I'm getting better.
So when Alex Gustafsson dropped out of a scheduled fight against Jones a few pay-per-views later, Cormier was ready to jump in. And after finally setting a scheduled bout date, their beef reached the boiling point where they just couldn't hold back from going at each other.
Daniel, can I ask you a question?
Yes, you can, John.
Could you kind of tell me some of your accolades, because I really don't know as much as I'd like to. I believe I'm going to win this fight in a devastating fashion. I say it all the time, and it usually happens. I'm looking to go out there and take down an Olympian.
I can defend takedowns, and he's going to get his ass taken down, and he won't get up. He's going to be stuck there.
The animosity had reached absolute boiling point when it came time to have a face-off at Media Day. Neither man could contain themselves anymore, and it absolutely exploded. It's super rare that we see fighters actually trade blows outside of the cage, especially in front of a room full of people. But for DC and John, they just hated each other that much apparently.
Before this situation, I never look at it as being too personal, but now it's very personal.
He's a little punk, and somebody needs to put him in his place, and I'm going to be the person to do it.
The Nevada State Athletic Commission later fined Jones $50,000 and Cormier $9,000 for the incident, but of course, the animosity only kept building, with DC saying he'd spit in John's face and Jones saying he'd kill him.
John. Can you hear that, John?
You got your ass whipped today, buddy.
No, I didn't. You're a pussy.
Oh, yeah, you did it. I had you on
You're
your back.
such a little
Had
Oh
you
my
on your
God.
back.
I wish they would let me next door so I can spit in your face.
You know I would absolutely kill you if you ever did something like that,
You
right?
could never kill me.
Oh, I bet you I could.
Ultimately, it only helped promote the fight even further, which John managed to win fairly dominantly. They'd have a rematch, but it was seriously one of the most personal feuds over a UFC title. It was surprising to see two professionals make it that personal, but of course, that was nothing compared to what happened between Conor McGregor and Khabib Nurmagomedov. This beef turned almost into pure hatred and has to be one of the most personal beefs in mixed martial arts history. These guys absolutely loathed each other, but they didn't actually start off that way. In September 2014, actually right after McGregor's victory over Dustin Poirier at UFC 178, both fighters shared a rare moment of mutual respect. A now legendary photograph from that event shows McGregor and Nurmagomedov posing together, highlighting a time when their relationship was seemingly pretty good. Nurmagomedov even purchased a McGregor t-shirt and suggested they train together, which later would seem pretty unbelievable considering what happened next. After McGregor moved to the lightweight division, both fighters had their eyes set now on the same title, and the thing that really pissed off Nurmagomedov was being used almost as part of a negotiation tactic by the UFC.
They do this to get guys to have leverage as a negotiation ploy.
If you think UFC use my name, right?
Yes.
Okay, why you not put this? When UFC send me 2 contracts,
sure.
you
to put pressure on Eddie to accept the deal and not negotiate.
Why you not say nothing about me?
Because I didn't want to play in that game. I'm here to report the facts and the news.
Khabib had signed a contract to fight then-champion Eddie Alvarez, but McGregor secured the title shot instead, and of course, Khabib thought it was #1 bullshit and led immediately to a ton of resentment. So after McGregor went on to KO Alvarez at UFC 205, it's not surprising Nurmagomedov had some bad words for him. He called him out backstage and referred to him as a chicken.
Beginning of the year, he tapped like chicken. End of the year, he fight for the title. Irish, only 6 million. Russian, 150 million. I wanna fight with your chicken because this is #1 easy fight in lightweight division.
This was the first big public challenge to Conor, and the beef only continued to build throughout 2017. Nurmagomedov continued to mock McGregor, while McGregor labeled Nurmagomedov a pullout merchant due to his history of injuries. But it was during UFC 223 fight week when Nurmagomedov was on the warpath, and he and his team confronted Artem Lobov, a close friend and training partner of McGregor, calling him out over some comments he'd made to Russian media. And unbelievably, in retaliation, McGregor grabbed an entire posse and boarded a private plane almost immediately heading for UFC 223 fight week. Members of the MMA media let them through a door backstage where Conor and his lads began taking out their frustrations on a bus filled with what they thought was Khabib's team, but was in fact full of the entire UFC 223 fight card. Conor himself was seen picking up a dolly and launching it through the window, which smashed, injuring other fighters. Khabib didn't come off the bus, pretty sure because everyone was trying desperately to stop him, and the whole incident landed McGregor in court the next day. Eventually, the two men fought at UFC 229, but after Nurmagomedov's victory, more madness ensued as a brawl erupted involving both camps, showing that the bad blood extended beyond their own fight in the octagon. This progression from mutual respect to absolute intense hostility showcases how quickly the tides of MMA can change when there's world titles, reputation, and money on the line. Which also, sadly, is exactly what happened when two brothers turned into bitter enemies. Of course, we've got to talk about Colby Covington and Jorge Masvidal. These two men, perhaps more than anyone else in this video, went from complete brothers to total adversaries. Between 2013 and 2017, Covington and Masvidal were inseparable, training together at American Top Team. They lived together, cornered each other's fights, and shared a brotherly bond. Masvidal even talked about this period, saying, "That was my boy. I had nothing but love for him." When they first met, Covington had barely gotten started in MMA, just a college wrestler, but by 2018, he'd made himself into a top contender and in the process adopting a brash, villainous persona, using trash talk and even political provocations to gain attention. This transformation didn't sit well with Masvidal, who began to view Covington as fake and accused him of playing a character, but ultimately, the breaking point came when Masvidal alleged that Covington failed to pay his lifelong striking coach, Paulino Hernandez, after he'd won the UFC interim title.
He's in it for himself. He's got no friends, and that's why he trashed another one of our teammates, the Topuria, before his fight. You know, he ripped off my coach. It was his coach. We were with him till his title fight. After he won the title, he owed him a certain amount of money. Didn't pay him. I said, if you don't pay him, I'm gonna F you up. My coach got in between it. Doesn't have to be like this. Let it slide. Blah blah blah. Since then, I ain't talked to the dude.
Covington denied these allegations and basically said that Masvidal's resentment stemmed from jealousy over his own success and title win.
All he cares about is himself. That's all Jorge is a guy that cares for himself. He doesn't care for others, and he doesn't care for anybody unless they can do something for him. And I'm not that guy. I'm not going to always just do stuff for you and then be taken for granted. So, you know, now I passed him up. I'm making more money than him. I'm banging harder chicks than him. I'm doing better in life, and he's just a jealous little
That's when Covington started calling Masvidal Street Judas and claiming he'd been carrying him for years during training sessions. But he didn't stop there, attacking Masvidal's personal life, talking about his family and kids, as well as his upbringing. He made fun of his losses, particularly to Kamaru Usman, and probably made him reach boiling point when he said,
"This is a piece of shit deadbeat dad."
Both men would have several fights, though, before UFC 272 when they were matched up finally to settle the score.
This is as close as it gets to personal. There's one individual that I'm gonna break his face shortly, but at the same time, I'm gonna send him to the hospital, been asking himself.
Unfortunately, though, that wasn't the case, and Covington dominated the bout over 5 rounds, but even the post-fight tension suggested that this personal vendetta was far from settled. Just a few weeks after the fight, the conflict finally spilled into real life when Masvidal allegedly attacked Covington outside a restaurant in Miami, reportedly breaking his tooth.
What's up? I'm from Dade County. You talk that shit, you gotta back it up. That's how my city rolls, man.
Covington responded by labeling Masvidal a criminal and said that the guy would be facing legal repercussions. And Jorge was indeed arrested and charged with aggravated battery and criminal mischief. In November 2023, Masvidal accepted a plea deal, pleading guilty to a misdemeanor battery charge, which led to the dismissal of the felony charges. So Masvidal avoided jail time as a result, but it probably was quite close, and considering they didn't settle the beef inside the cage already, I'm sure things are still not over. This one might go on for the rest of their lives, but for some people, beefs just never seem to end, especially if it involves someone like Nate Diaz and what happened when he went after Khabib Nurmagomedov. The tensions between Nate and Khabib kicked off pretty much right away, and actually this one was immediately physical, but then also continued for several years. In August 2015, during the World Series of Fighting 22 event in Las Vegas, both men were attending the show, and out of nowhere, an altercation erupted between the two fighters. Reports said that it was Mr. Nate Diaz who initiated the confrontation by going over and slapping Khabib, who apparently was mocking him and the Diaz team.
I was standing there watching Jake, my friend, fight, and they took a picture, a group picture, with me behind him just to laugh at me, like make fun of me. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And I'm watching my friend walk out, trying to watch his fight, and then he's like, ha, come on, man. And they're all laughing, all the like 12 Russian dudes.
That's what set it off.
Yeah, I slapped him in his face. They're making fun of me. I was like, what?
It all led to a brawl that security swiftly intervened to contrast, but the rivalry only intensified over the years, with both athletes going back and forth on social media. Nate Diaz wasn't letting it go, saying, "I slapped you in your head and your team didn't do shit." Despite all this though, and despite them being in the same weight class and having mutual rivalries with similar opponents, Nate Diaz and Khabib Nurmagomedov never faced each other in the UFC octagon. I mean, way back in 2014, Dana White had said something about Nate being offered the fight and he turned it down? Khabib told the media he was offered that fight 3 times and it never happened.
What are you talking about, Nate Diaz? How many times he lose in UFC? 11 times. What about real contenders? I asked 3 times UFC asked me fight versus Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz 3 times say, hey, I don't want somebody catch me, like grab me. This is not boxing, this is MMA.
And then at UFC 239, Nate and Khabib once again crossed paths. Both fighters were in attendance as spectators, they exchanged words and it escalated, prompting security to intervene and separate them.
Yes! Go on, Nate! Go on, Nate! Fuck you!
Nothing physical that time, but considering they never fought, outside the cage is all we got with these two. Sometimes though, just press conference can be enough to get 2 guys fired up enough to come to blows, or at least that's all Sean Strickland needed when sat on stage with Dricus du Plessis. After Strickland shockingly secured the UFC middleweight championship by dismantling Israel Adesanya, it seemed immediately clear who the next contender was going to be. Dricus du Plessis. And considering he apparently was supposed to fight Izzy before Sean at UFC 293, but had said no because of an injury, I'm sure he thought that belt should have been his. But tensions didn't really boil over until they were both on stage together at the big 2024 seasonal press conference.
The only thing, Dricus, just don't let your coach grab your dick no more. We ain't about this shit, guys. It's gonna throw me off. I'm gonna be fighting, I'm gonna look over, they're gonna be making out and shit. I can't handle this shit. Let's just have a nice clean fight, no grabbing.
But actually, it was Sean O'Malley who said something pretty crazy.
At least my dad didn't me.
And it probably sent Sean over the edge.
I just want to make fuckers bleed. And Dricus is the next one who's gonna fucking bleed. I can't fucking wait. You can take this belt, you can give it to anybody in the fucking stands. I don't give a f. I don't care about this belt. The only thing I want to do is make this fucking man bleed.
You are not world championship maturity. You won by fluke, and that's the one
I won by a
point
bro.
in your life. Try to finish a fight. Try to finish a fight with your 33% finish.
Go f your coach, you.
But this final line from Dricus, I think, is really what led to what happens next.
You think your dad beat the shit out of you? Your dad doesn't have shit on me. I'm gonna show you what it's like to beat you. I mean, every childhood memory you have is gonna come back when I'm in there with you. Every single one, the one where you lie in bed at night, where your dad comes in and he beats the shit out of you.
Take your fucking soul, you understand me, you fucking pussy?
I mean, Sean basically says it.
Beat me after you f***ing.
It just so happened then that later on during UFC 296 at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, UFC President Dana White had seated Strickland and Duplessis right next to each other. Some people claimed he did it on purpose to generate media buzz around the fight, but it definitely fired back because Strickland basically lunged at Duplessis after getting taunted and started throwing punches before security intervened to separate them.
So it started with Duplessis sort of being shown. Strickland fires the gun. Duplessis dodges it. All right, so I'm being told that Strickland asks Gilbert Burns' son to move. Oh, and then,
wow.
Oh my goodness.
Oh wow.
Out of nowhere. That's kind of crazy.
Yep.
Do we know
what fucking stupid is that? I mean, seriously. Well, I don't know what humans you can sit Strickland next to, but definitely not Duplessis.
The beef was just that intense. Apparently Sean couldn't wait sometimes, someone just crosses that line of disrespect, and people feel a retaliation is necessary. Some words can be taken back, but someone like Chael Sonnen has never had a problem using them to get under his opponent's skin. You could ask the entire country of Brazil, but it was his beef with Wanderlei Silva that spilled outside of the octagon. If you want to talk about someone who loved to walk right along the line of what's fair to say and not in combat sports, you have to mention Chael Sonnen. But when he started a campaign to go after Anderson Silva, who had the title, he started targeting all of the Brazilian fighters on the roster.
Anderson's a fraud. He's a liar and he's a thief. This guy's not from a bowing culture. You bow in Brazil, they'll hit you over the head and take your wallet out of your pocket.
I bought packets of soap for them because I know they don't have it.
You are an immigrant from Brazil. I am a gangster from America. Are you sure you want to play that game with me? There was a bus that this is a true story. There was a bus that pulled up to a red light and Little Nog tried to feed it a carrot while Big Nog was petting it. He thought it was a horse.
Wanderlei Silva, a legendary Brazilian fighter, didn't like this and supposedly confronted Sonnen, saying, "You have to respect us. This is our country. You can't talk like that." Sonnen didn't back down and kept tweeting, taking jabs at Wanderlei. Obviously, the animosity escalated, and in August 2013, after Sonnen's victory over Mauricio Shogun Rua, in his post-fight interview, Sonnen called out Silva, saying,
Wanderlei Silva! 6 feet tall and 205 pounds. Boy, until I met you, I didn't know they could stack crap that high.
This was Sonnen's trash talk during this time.
Listen, Wanderlei, I will do a home invasion on you. I will cut the power to your house, and the next thing you hear will be me climbing up your stairs in a pair of night vision goggles I bought in the back of Soldier of Fortune magazine. I'll pick the lock to the master room door, take a picture of you in bed with the Nogueira brothers working on your jiu-jitsu. I'll take said photograph, post it at www.dorksfrombrazil.com.
The UFC capitalized on this rivalry by announcing Silva and Sonnen as opposing coaches for the Ultimate Fighter Brazil 3. But before they could fight like professionals in the cage, during filming, tensions boiled over when Silva demanded an apology from Sonnen for his derogatory remarks about Brazil. Sonnen refused, leading to a physical altercation where both coaches exchanged blows before being separated by staff and fighters. Despite the anticipation, multiple scheduled fights between Silva and Sonnen were postponed or cancelled due to various issues, including injuries and regulatory suspensions. The long-awaited bout finally took place on June 24, 2017 at Bellator NYC, where Sonnen was able to pull out the win, with both guys now well past their prime, but equally old enough to settle their beef. This was a meeting of two of the most unpredictable characters in MMA these days, the complete wildcard Kevin Holland and absolute berserker Khamzat Chimaev. And this one all started way back in 2020 when Kevin Holland publicly criticized Khamzat, basically accusing him of receiving preferential treatment from the UFC, and when they met in a hotel lobby, Chimaev confronted him.
Yeah, he pushed me. He pushed me.
Yeah, what happened to the hotel?
He pushed me. He pushed me and said I was the help. I mean, you know what I mean? We did start a COVID cleaning business, but goddamn, I don't work at the hotel, you know what I mean? And don't tell the freaking people you don't know who I am when we got in a little thing at the thing.
It wasn't a fight, so to speak, or anything, but the foundations were basically lead for a future confrontation, and in 2022, during the lead up to UFC 279, when both fighters were booked for the PPV and Kevin made it clear there was still issues between them.
He only does this extra wannabe street shit when the media's around.
And when they were both backstage while the UFC was gearing up for the PPV press conference, they went at it.
There's Khamzat Chimaev and his team. There's Kevin Holland and his team. They've been exchanging some words as of late, and they started to exchange some words, and they got very close to each other and were kind of pushing each other and whatnot. Now, Tiki Gosen, who is a longtime MMA fighter now turned MMA manager, happened to be back there and got in between them and broke it up. And then Nate and his team show up, and then all of a sudden water bottles are being thrown, and I guess there were some people who were upset about, you know, where Tiki was standing and the things that were being said back and forth. So then the whole thing gets out of hand, water bottles being thrown.
It actually led to Dana White completely canceling the press conference, saying that it wasn't going to be safe, and it's pretty unheard of for the UFC to do anything like that, so you know it was pretty bad.
Yeah, this ain't gonna happen. I apologize, everybody. I am in very weird waters here. This has never happened in the history of this company, so trust me when I tell you this is the right decision not to do this press conference right now.
Now, it seemed like there was going to be some beef that needed to be settled, and as it then happened, it was going to be taken care of almost immediately. It turned out that Khamzat Chimaev missed weight for his scheduled bout against Nate Diaz, coming in weighing at 178.5 pounds, 7.5 pounds over the welterweight limit. So, due to the big weight miss and the backstage brawl, the UFC restructured the fight card, pairing Chimaev against Holland in a catchweight bout. Funnily enough, the brawl actually helped them schedule a fight, so they got to settle the beef inside the cage, and unfortunately for Kevin Holland, it was completely one-sided. The fight was kinda just sprung on Kevin and was sure a bit of a surprise, but not as surprising as what Jorge Masvidal did to Leon Edwards backstage at a show in the UK. UFC Fight Night 147 in London was supposed to be a big triumphant return to the country's capital. There were a bunch of new stars on the card and felt like a new era of UK MMA. First of all, Leon Edwards had a big showing and did exactly what he was supposed to do, picking up a big win over Gunnar Nelson. Also on the card, though, was a determined Jorge Masvidal, fresh out of the jungle on a reality TV show and ready to reinvent his career. He was put up against the next big UK star Darren Till in the main event, and in front of his home crowd, he unleashed on Till one of the nastiest knockouts of the year. But instead of celebrating his win, Masvidal's night wasn't over just quite yet. As Masvidal was mid-interview backstage talking about his big KO, it just so happened that right while that was going on, Leon Edwards walked past and called over to him, letting him know he was next. Masvidal, though, isn't the kind of guy to let a comment slide, so he walked straight over to Leon with his hands behind his back, and then...
Hey, come over here, say it in my face, bro.
He hit Leon with what he called a three-piece and a soda. He unloaded a quick combo and caught Leon clean, who actually looked busted up and cut, taking more damage than in his fight with Gunnar Nelson.
As I'm walking up to him, I got my hands behind my back to signal I'm not coming here for problems. But he put his hands up like this, it's on video, and he walks towards me. Well, where I'm from, if you do that, you're gonna punch me in the face, and that's not gonna happen, Leon. You're a dork, you're JV beta, you are what you are, bro. You're just a loser in life, man. You're not gonna get a hit off me, you know, so I had to give him the three-piece with the soda.
The beef with this one kind of existed just because they were in the same weight class and at the same event, but also because Jorge has said from his perspective, if you're going to talk trash, you gotta be ready to back it up. Even though Edwards went on to rise through the ranks as well as Masvidal, who became the BMF, it seems like they did this backwards, had the scrap first, and now have some other beef still to settle. Sucker punching an elite MMA fighter you'd think doesn't actually work, but I guess Jorge proved that you just have to be super fast. A tactic a man named Crazy Horse definitely used way back in 2005 backstage against Wanderlei Silva. Few backstage altercations have become as legendary as the encounter between Charles Crazy Horse Bennett and the members of the Shoot Box Academy, all of it happening during Pride Shockwave 2005 in Saitama, Japan.
One night at band camp, I had this fight in Japan, Pride that was.
As the story goes, tensions initially rose between Bennett and the Shoot Box team when after his fight, Crazy Horse returned to his locker room, which happened to be the same as the Shoot Box team's, and apparently he was giving the stink eye to Cristiano Marcelo, the Shoot Box's jiu-jitsu coach. Well, turns out he didn't like that and went over to confront him.
Chimaev, esse magrão é folgado pra caralho, brother. Folgado, quando for, seu próximo, então sou o próximo, tá rindo? Why are you laughing to me, bro?
Things, though, quickly turned physical with the two men going at it right in the changing rooms.
So I was just sitting right there like, hey man, get Yukino to set the fight up. As he's running up on me, I'm standing up. And when I'm standing up, he throws 2 shots and hits me. So when he hits me, I slam him. And everybody sees the slam, right?
Everyone just kind of sat back and let them sort it out themselves, and eventually, Marcelo sunk in a triangle choke that put Bennett out unconscious.
The next thing you know, I recall waking up.
I mean, seriously, pretty crazy that this was happening behind closed doors at a freaking Pride event. But that's not even the craziest, but because what happened next went down in MMA legend. Bennett jumped up from being choken and ran over and blasted Wanderlei Silva, knocking him out.
I woke up and grabbed my jacket and said, nigga, ain't nobody scared of you. And hit him with that right thunder. And when I hit him with that right thunder, he fell down. The niggas tried to catch me at the door, but I threw a kick back to stop one of the niggas, you know what I'm saying, from coming. Everybody was like, oh, you lying. You ain't knock out Candy Leg.
Wanderlei confirmed that story.
For years, no one believed him. I mean, let's not sugarcoat it. Bennett doesn't really seem like the most reliable source of information, so pretty much everyone kinda just dismissed it as kinda bullshit. But incredibly, Wanderlei Silva has actually acknowledged that it happened.
O cara virou e pau! Me deu soco no queixo. Aí eu tô sentado num banco de frente com o meu professor. Eu falei, Rafael, o que aconteceu? Aí ele falou, o cara acabou de te nocautear aqui.
Now, to be honest, the animosity didn't end there. Bennett's rivalry with the shootbox team continued, and he even fought one of Silva's proteges at another Pride event. And guess what? He knocked him out as well. 2-0 versus shootbox for that crazy horse. What a story that is. Well, if you thought fighters had a lot of beefs they had to settle outside the cage, then you wouldn't believe what some bodybuilders and gym bros get up to. Only these guys think they can fight, and believe it or not, when they've come face to face with actual trained athletes, well, let's just say that all that lifting didn't really help anybody. Check this next video out if you want to see them get humbled.